Hi folks, Josh Knight the First here with another episode of Writer Rebuild, coming to you with episode 34 of the series. Let's get right into it. So this week on Kamen Rider Build, we're dealing with the aftermath of last week's episode, and I know it was a doozy, but things are actually going to get worse for our heroes. Yes, we're at the point where we're building up more of a threat in the series, and we need that because, as we all know, we're building towards Sento eventually getting a final form, but right now we just need things to be that much worse off for everybody. But we do need to fill in our characters from what happened last week, so we should probably see how they're going to take that information. Now, as we figured was going to happen, we see that Ryuga, Sento, and Sawatari show up on the battlefield just a little too late. They're there to see the aftermath, the Prime Minister there in Gentoku's arms, as he's already passed away. Now, Evol, having now gotten this new power, is just really happy to rub it into everybody that, hey, you guys were just a little too late to save somebody's life. Mind you, it wasn't my fault that he's dead. He got in the way of me trying to kill the other guy. Now that we're seeing a little bit more of Evol's capability here on the battlefield, it's worth noting a couple of things here. First and foremost, that consistently Evol, Bloodstark, however you want to refer to him, has been using the same weapon set since the beginning of the series, the Trans-Steam Gun and the Steam Blade. Now, in my opinion, those aren't very good weapons, very strong weapons. After a certain point, you would think they would have been phased out for something different, but really all we've gotten are palette swaps over the course of the series. The Steam Blade, however, has been consistent no matter who's using it, so it's interesting to see that such a toyetic looking weapon can actually carry so much power. On top of that, we see that Evol has had no problem displaying his power, saying that he's only using 2% of what his actual capability is in order to defeat the three riders very quickly. Now, it is nice at the beginning of this fight that we were treated to a triple rider transformation, but that fight was ended very quickly, and really we've only got two fights in this episode. This very quick one at the beginning, and then the extended one later on between Grease and Cross versus Evol. So what we see is that Evol has infected Sento with some sort of Martian or extraterrestrial sort of venom or poison that's going to kill him in 3 days. Now, the reason for this being, this is all tying into a plan he's had going since the beginning. If there's something I've had to give Evol, or really Isurugi's Bloodstark, however you want to refer to him, is that the entire time this whole series, he's had it planned out to a T. Nothing that happens in this episode isn't outside of his scope. And by the time you get to the end of the episode, we really see just how much he's had his hands in everybody's lives. Even more so as having backstory on top of backstory just to stick it to you, whoever you are. Now, in the midst of all this, we see that Nanba's still lying to himself, that even though Evol has blatantly made his plans known that he's going to take over everything and use Pandora's box to destroy the world, he still thinks that he can make money off this by getting a hold of Pandora's box. And admittedly, Pandora's box is still important to the plot, but we're not going to see it this episode. But it's still the sought-after thing by Nanba. And we see that Utsumi is still buying into this idea that Nanba will eventually be on top, but he really needs to answer for his actions last week since they've led to all this chaos this week. Now, because this is an extraterrestrial poison in origin, Sento cannot be cured by human means. Now, I do appreciate that very quickly Misora tried to cure him using Vernage's power, but unfortunately Vernage is on the brink of disappearing, as we're told here in the story. Now, I appreciate that Misora as a character has grown a lot and that she has agency, which I've said several times, but really I have to compliment her acting in this episode. She's really crying out in pain over the potential loss of her friend or the loss of her father, taking on Evol directly, telling him, "Give me my father back." Now, the reason Evol is there with Misora at all is because he contacted Ryuga to make a trade, which isn't really much of a trade at all. Give me everything I want and maybe I'll cure Sento. See, this of course buying into the whole thing that Evol has had this planned out to a T the entire time. None of the build team has any real choice in all of this. Even if you're trying to get some sort of a good end out of this, albeit it's not much in the grand scheme of things, one life for many, there's not much they can do about it. They have to give in to his demands. Now, there's a couple of things we can take away from this. One is the growth of Ryuga as a character, which I'll get to here in just a little bit, but the other thing about that being the kind of bad way they're portraying how this poison is actually coursing its way through Sento's body. Over the course of these 3 days while the poison's infected his system, his actor's just there writhing in pain kind of unbelievably, and take how the makeup looks on him for showing the poison one way or the other, but once we get to the end, it's really not that believable. Now, as far as Ryuga is concerned in his growth as a character, we see that he is more than willing to sacrifice everything that they've worked for the sake of his friend, because Sento just means that much to him. Now, that's growth as a character that he even mentions on the battlefield, that, oh, maybe I would have said to hell with him earlier on, but he's really helped me grow, and he realizes this, and he's trying to be a better person. But unfortunately, we see that Evol planned for that as well by providing Ryuga with this giant plot dump about things he didn't already know, and actually things we as the audience were kind of wondering about. As Ryuga and Isurugi are waiting for Sawatari to bring the rest of the full bottles there to them at the location of Pandora's box, we see that Isurugi has to let Ryuga know two things. One, that he and Evolt are exactly the same. They're the same entity. They are both Evolt in some way. Now, what exactly that means, we don't know precisely. Later on in the episode, we see that Evol refers to a potential Martian genocide that Ryuga may have taken part in, or at least the part of him that's alien took part in. But right now, the whole idea is anything that Evolt is saying, one, you shouldn't necessarily trust, and two, it goes back to that same thing of him trying to raise Ryuga's hazard level. As we all recall, the more emotional he gets, the more quickly that he raises that hazard level for Evolt's purposes. But getting back to what happened in the past, we see that there's actually a lot more to Katsuragi's character than we were originally told. And this of course ties into information that people who hadn't already seen Heisei Generations Final would be learning about this week in accordance with the Blu-ray release of that movie. What we find out is that Katsuragi on more than one occasion actually donned the Build suit. So that would tie into the last episode of Ex-Aid as well as his guest appearance in the Ex-Aid movie. Those were both Katsuragi as Build. Although why he sounds like Sento, we're not sure yet, but don't let that bug you right now. The important thing that's revealed to us is that Katsuragi was actually the one who invited Ryuga over to his house. The reason being is that he had actually found out about Evolt's plan and that the two of them were connected. So his idea was to off both of them at the same time and effectively save the world. Bloodstark unfortunately saw that this is exactly what he was going to do and again planned ahead, giving him a fake build driver, that way he couldn't transform. This then led into the death as it was presented to us, as well as Sato Taro unfortunately getting caught in the crossfire. So through all of this, Bloodstark, Isurugi, Evolt, they've had everything planned out, and it kind of bugs me, but it kind of doesn't, in that I like that a plan is really planned out and is executed well, but at the same time, come on man, leave some room for error. Now we see that Ryuga listens to these facts, but he's really not trying to internalize them right away. The whole idea that he's trying to hold on to his humanity, or at this point his perceived humanity, is important to his growth as a character. Bloodstark's whole plan this whole time has been to manipulate his state of mind, but Ryuga on the other hand is still trying to hold on to a sense of self and growth, which actually I appreciate, and that carries over into the fight. And speaking of that fight, I appreciate that we had some better choreography this week showing the power of Evol over Grease and Cross there in the battlefield, but on top of that we got actual flames here. I appreciate that the suit actor for Cross, who is Eitoku, he's played several different writers in the past, starting with Kickhopper, Den-O, Rodform, and so on and so forth, is actually willing to throw himself through flames for these great shots that we're showing here in this fight. But unfortunately, with Sento flatlining without the sound of flatlining, we see that Cross has to make an all-out one-on attack against Evol, and using a cross counter, it looks like he won, but did he? The answer is unfortunately no. Even though the poison has been removed from Sento's body and Isurugi is effectively missing, we see that Evol himself, the form, the entity, whatever you want to refer to it as, is still alive and well inside Ryuga's body now having fused together into this Evol version that Isurugi was referring to earlier in the episode. Now he must have been planning for this, otherwise he wouldn't have had that dragon bottle that we hadn't seen before this episode. With it, he uses that and the Rider System bottle to transform into Evol Phase 2, which happens to have a face mask that looks exactly like Cross. Now what exactly this means for our heroes, we'll have to wait for next week to find out, when we see that the tagline is that Ryuga will now destroy the world. Kind of bleak considering that we still haven't gotten to Sento's final form yet. So overall this episode again was a little simplistic in that there wasn't really a lot happening. It was really two major scenes and one major fight, but aside from that, they are really showing the audience that there is no stopping Evol at this point. He's planned everything out so far in advance, there really is no stopping him, and because that's so clear to the audience and not so clear to our heroes, it's kind of irksome right now. I really wish they would give us something to hope in right now, because we've already lost the Prime Minister and he was our best chance at being a good government liaison. Sento has been incapacitated, we just lost Ryuga, and Sawatari doesn't have enough power, and also Gentoku is still dealing with the loss of his father, so what are the heroes going to do? I will give the show that much. They are really upping the threat. I just wish they would counter the threat a little bit quicker. But those of course are my thoughts on the episode. I want to hear what you guys thought in the comments below, so let's go ahead and talk about a few things. First off, Katsuragi. Now that we've been given all this new information by Isurugi, does this redeem Katsuragi from the way we thought of him earlier on in the series? Secondly, Vernage. Why is it that she has weakened in power, but Evol has remained strong inside Isurugi's body? body. And third, the Hell Brothers. Just where were they in this episode? We remember that they were fighting Greece about an episode or so back, but we don't know how that fight ended, so where the heck are they? You tell me in the comments below. And of course, during the week, you can always talk to me on social media. Over on Twitter, I'm at JoshKnight1st. This has been episode 34 of Writer Rebuild for episode 34 of Kamen Rider Build, the separated best match. I'm Josh Knight the First. I'll see you guys again next episode.